If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free, and you guessed it, it's free. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in just one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Pieces of a Nation. Welcome back, Pieces of the Nation listeners. Thank you again for coming back onto this platform. This is the podcast that makes you feel stuff. My name is Richard Chu. Please follow us on Instagram at Pieces of a Nation. And while you're at it, please subscribe, rate, and review our show. It's on all your podcast platforms. Also, if you'd like, please support us on Patreon. It's only $5 a month, and all of this goes to post-production, all the work that goes through this. And again, it's only $5 a month. So just go to www.patreon.com/Pieces of a Nation. Today, I'd like to introduce a lovely lady that I've had the pleasure of knowing for the past 5 or 6 years. And she is a publicist, a media consultant. She's also board of the LA Femme International Film Festival. Deborah Galils, welcome to the show.
Hey, Richard.
How's it going? How is everything?
Everything's great. I'm starting to feel like, things are finally going to open up again soon.
Yeah. Have you been sort of, going out slightly?
Yeah. I'm actually, my birthday was at the beginning of May. So I've been taken out. We didn't do one big dinner like I usually do. It's been like dinner here, dinner there. And tonight, the finale was some of my friends taking me to dinner.
Oh, the finale?
Right. And then I actually have, a date on Sunday afternoon. So that's nice.
No kidding. Congratulations on that.
Well, thank you.
How did you all meet during this pandemic?
Well, I signed up on the JDate site because, I decided that I was going to expand that part of my life as well. And, things in my life and my work life and my career and stuff have just, been really going great, gangbusters. But I understand I could be tied up all the time, literally. I'm just one of these people that gets involved in a lot of different things. But I decided that I have to open up that aspect as well.
That's right. It's not easy. Especially in this time, right? To even start dating. So, dating in general. I don't date anymore, obviously, because I'm in a marriage and we have kids. But but I can.
Do you have kids or do you have kid?
Oh, a kid. Well, we're looking to have more kids, so I'm just putting it out there, right? But. Like dating is not an easy thing. Like I'm not a big dater, right? Like I'm more of a relationship person. And when I first started opening up to the fact of, let's date, that I don't know, it just felt awkward and weird to me. So, but I can only imagine being in this time and going through all that. Man, that must be so different.
Well, towards the theme of what we're going to talk about, I'm the happy warrior. So for me, it's, it's more like stretching myself and taking myself out of my comfort zone. And and I'm not having I'm not saying, I have to meet the love of my life by the end of, the summer or something. But what I'm saying is that I have to open, and it may not even come, through that. It could come through work, so many different things, but I feel like it's, it's something that I need to add to my life to make
Absolutely.
to make it really balanced,
Absolutely. A counterpart is always something beneficial in our lives. I feel, at least. I mean, it's cool going solo, but you can only go lone wolf for so long, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's jump into this dialogue. I mean, again, we've known each other for a while, and I know some things about you, but I'm really curious about like so many other facets of your life. So so I'm just going to start asking you questions and see how you answer these. Sound good?
Okay, perfect. Well, you're
Okay,
laughing,
so
I don't know I mean, let's do it, man. Let's try.
I'm only laughing to ease the pain a little bit. No, I'm kidding. So I know you used to be part of the studio system, and I just wanted to understand, and for the listeners out there too, if there's anyone that wants to get into what Deb wants to get, is essentially, again, you do a lot of publicists and you're in the entertainment business essentially, but how did you get started in the entertainment business?
Okay. So, I mean, we're going to go back many, decades, 3 at least. And things were much different back then. I have to say that ahead of time. I mean, the whole business has changed 10 times since I started, but when I, was finished with, school, I lived in New York City, and, my first professional job in the business was I was the assistant of, the jazz great Lionel Hampton. And he was a mentor to me. He was my godfather. He brought, this man, taught me so much in my life, and was really like, he understood, because I have a very, I would say, like, a very a spontaneous nature, so to speak. And he had performed with Bette Midler at one time, and he said that I was kind of kooky like that too. That that it's like I didn't really kind of fit into a box. And from there, I decided I wanted to try Hollywood. And I had met a producer that had a deal at Paramount Pictures. During the course of that time, I, was at one point, like the assistant, like a temp assistant to David Picker, who had been the head of United Artists in the New York office. And then I decided to, move out west, and a producer gave me a couple names. And then I had, the person who actually helped me, one of the people that introduced me to Buddhism was also a screenwriter who had, gave me a lot of, people to call when I came out. And then there were other people that I just knew. So in those days, there were always jobs, and I made a good impression. And so my first job in Los Angeles is I was a reader at what essentially today is United Talent Agency, but back then it was called Leading Artists. And then, I didn't have a smooth sailing kind of thing, like one thing led to another. It would always be like, sometimes I would have a year where I'd be looking for another job, and I'd have to, find ways to survive. And it was often really difficult. And thank goodness I had my Buddhist practice, because I always ended up getting better off than when I started. And through a series of then I started getting a series of development jobs. And one of them was, at a company that was at 20th Century Fox, where we had an overall deal. And I, was there for a couple years. And I went to a company after that had a deal with Warner Brothers Television, and we were, making movies and producing TV content. And I think that, if people want to do that today, I always tell people that, either, start as like an assistant at one of the agencies, because, if I had stayed in that system at UTA longer, I probably would have, done a lot better once you go in there, because your stock and trade is writers who, that can, that can, where, so that you can be in business with people. It does have something to do with personality. It does have something to do with acumen and, how smart you might be with a script. But at the end of the day, if the more people that that you can bring in, that you have relationships with that are saleable, that's what's really going to lead you to where you want to go in the business. And I think today, it's like a lot of times, not everybody that's at an agency is necessarily going to get promoted to be an agent. They might, and so those people, they still are valuable. So that's, the shorter way of getting into some sort of like executive position is because they have those relationships. When you're like an assistant, no matter where, it's not that you're just answering somebody's phone and making meetings. I mean, you give notes, you get really involved with these people's lives. They become friends of yours too. So I think just getting into the door.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really about taking those steps and, doing your best to flip those stones so that you can find what you're looking for. And you're right. It's not easy. Not every single career path is the same path. Everyone's is completely different. Especially in the entertainment industry, I don't know what it's like to be a doctor or a lawyer, but I can only assume that you go through a certain process in order to get to a certain level and start practicing that certain career path, right? But when we're in the entertainment industry, that's a tough thing because you're just thrown into it, and some people take classes, right? But most of the time, at least from my experience, I was thrown into it, and I really had to find my way and my people in order to find the right path, right? You mentioned you've been in this business for 3 decades or so, and you've seen a lot of changes, and I kind of want to go over the changes that you've gone through and you've seen. What sort of changes were dramatic, and what sort of changes did you want to see that have changed?
Okay, so I would say dramatic. When I first moved out here, so many producers and directors, they had deals with studios. So they had offices there, and the studio would pay for their assistant, pay for their vice president of development of a company, oftentimes even give them a development fund so that they could, create projects. And, you don't really see that very much anymore. I mean, unless it's just not as common. I mean, for example, like they would have a job list. When I first came out here, like they had so many producers that would be looking for a vice president of their company. So, I mean, I always had pretty good odds. Like if I went on like 9 or 10 interviews, I would probably get one offer. But it wouldn't be all in 1 month. It could be over a course of 6 months by the time, because not everybody that I applied to would interview me anyway. Some people said, she's good for this. Yeah, why not? And it's also like you would need a plethora of like, recommendations afterwards. So probably some of that was on your character with the people and how you got along. And then they wanted to see how much the power players that were supporting you really liked you. Another thing, writing deals were different too. I mean, there were a lot of writers that, were okay. They weren't brilliant writers, but they made enough money writing that they could buy very expensive houses and put their kids through college, and their scripts would probably never get made. It was they put much more money into, and the deals were more lucrative if you wanted to, if you got into it to begin with. Now, it's just not quite like that. They might give you the first pass. They really are going to think about any further investment into it, unless you're a really big writer. And, also like if you were, in a certain, like gang of men, obviously, they would go from one big job to another. Women helped each other. Now I think it's much more, prevalent, but back then, hit and miss. I mean, and so I would say like, and it's also, it leads to different ways to create movies. It was funny because when I was kind of done with my development thing, I was an independent producer for about 5 years, and they were probably the hardest 5 years of my life. I will not lie about it. I mean, I had, I can't even tell you some of the hard times that I went through, But, the one thing, it was kind of weird how things sort of even themselves out, because I was very reliant on the studio system and just trying to sell product to 20th Century Fox or somebody I knew at Universal. And I could always get meetings, and I maybe set up one or two things during the whole time, maybe four. And sometimes it would take, it'd be really hard to get the thing to the point where it would be made. So you would have to have a lot going on. And everything fell apart in my life really around that time. But out of that, I ended up getting hired from a Japanese media company. And then, and sort of led me to where I am today. I did part PR, part acquisition. Like I was, buying American content for Japanese and Korea television. And through that, I, met all the people from like the foreign distributors, all these other companies. So consequentially, I could have, if I had those contacts when I was an independent producer, I would have been much more successful. But I think that now people are more geared towards that to begin with, and finding funds and getting distribution deals from, the studios. And I think it's a lot better in a way. And I think that what I like about today too is that they're looking for fresh voices. It's not just the same old, same old. I've helped launch careers of, several young people who are doing really well. But, like probably 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, it would be a much harder path, because everybody would be looking for, the writer that's had a lot of deals, who's trying to sell them. And now it's, if you have a fresh voice and a fresh perspective, it's much more welcome. So I would say that that's the thing that I really like the most about today.
Right. It's definitely opened up a lot more, especially for you with the usage of the internet, right? Because you can literally tap into global collaborations and global connections, right? And it's truly amazing. I mean, I'm on the I've never experienced the studio side of producing. I'm more on the independent side, and I agree. It's the independent side is a massive hustle. And you've got to flip all the stones as best as possible in order to find the right people to join the team. You were talking about the struggle, and also being a woman in this business. So in lieu of the Me Too movement, right? There's so much that's been happening for the last several decades. It's not just the Me Too movement. It's been several decades of massive, standing up and really making change, right? But because of the Me Too movement and the internet, it really tapped into this whole another level of just exploding the veil, right? Taking the veil out and really showing who these wolves are. Can you describe what your outlook of, because I want to understand where you were pre Me Too, right? And then what your outlook is from this point on into the future.
Well, when I was young, and it would be normal for guys to say disgusting things, and you could fight it or you could just let it roll off your back. It wasn't it wasn't something that was abnormal. In fact, there's a guy I went to high school with, and he was like the best looking guy in our class, right? And I was on his birthday or something, he put on Facebook his picture from, high school. And I said, boy, you were such a hunk. And he was he's so conservative. He goes, how could you talk to me like that? That aren't you being a little bit too liberal with the way, it's so embarrassing that he would say that. And I just said, well, I've lived in Hollywood my whole life. What do you expect? To me, that's nothing, right? But I think that when we were younger, it was always, I can remember even when I was 23 years old and I was living in New York City before I worked for, Lionel, and I was working on Wall Street, and there was a married stockbroker that kept asking me out every night. And that was just normal behavior. There's a movie that was made in like 1959 for Fox called The Best of Everything. And that's, this was like, my thing was late 70s, early 80s, but it was still the same mentality where, I mean, people, it wasn't, there was no boundary on that. I think that it's up, I mean, but if you were like a real tight ass and then, that was going to, you have to kind of figure a way to get along and, not take it to heart. And then,
right.
And then just, keep moving forward in the way you want to. Now, that same person, would be in a whole different situation. For example, like Scott Rudin was, the president of the studio when I was an executive with my company there. I mean, he never was abusive to me, although he said something in a meeting once that somebody didn't do something right and they would never work again in this town. And, I felt bad for the person actually that he was talking about. But I mean, now you can see his behavior is held to a different standard, but he'd been actually doing the things that were written about for, decades. And nobody said anything about it. And I have a lot of friends that work for him and his production company. And you would have to be the happy warrior and get something out of it to do it. But it was sort of like a badge of honor. If you could last with him and come out whole from the experience, you were probably really, regarded, greatly somewhere else.
Right. I mean, listen, man, I honestly believe that you can still run your business. You can still create, levels of success in your life. But there's two different types of people. There's one person that is the extreme, ferocious, animal who doesn't really care about people's feelings, right? Or there's a person that really fully respects that person and has a strong desire to look into the future and help other people because that's what they're there for. It's more service. It's funny because the past, I've been in the entertainment industry for the past 17 years, and when I first entered, I didn't understand the dynamics of it, and it sort of broke me, slightly. But obviously, I had to rebuild myself back and realize who the people that I was dealing with. But as I started to grow in this business, I started to find people that were really nice and were willing to want to lend a hand and help you, right? And it to this day it still blows my mind, and I think that's the shift. That really is a shift, is to help people as best as possible without you can be in the limelight if you want, but I think there's this balance of really being in the forefront of on the front lines, if you will, right, and being behind the scenes. And there's no less value in like other side. It's what you add into those moments, and your experience and your wisdom into those moments, and to kind of build each side so that you can progress, right? When you were moving through this path, you're talking about the happy warrior, right? And you're talking about the struggle. How does one become a happy warrior through the sheer struggle of disrespectful talk, not finding a job for a year or two, struggling with finances? How does one maintain a happy warrior's frame of mind?
Well, that's the catch-22. I mean, it's something you learn to develop because, when you realize that it's all within your grasp, and that, maybe that's the lesson you have to learn. I mean, I think being the happy warrior, like, learning from these experiences and not taking things, too personally. Some of the things that I did, you know, to keep myself going are, things that really were skills I could have used in my entertainment career, obviously. And I mean, I think it's, the thing is that if you can become the happy warrior and you can look at adversity, it's like what we're taught in Buddhism, right? As a stepping stone rather than an obstacle. I think that outlook is what's going to really change your environment one way or the other. Because I do believe that, that for every action, like there's an answer. So, for example, like when I was out of work and, after, like my independent producing career, I went to work for this, a Japanese media company and learned so much. And then years later, when I just happened to live in this building, my neighbor, recommended me to, a huge anime company in Japan to be their publicist because of that experience with Japan before, which has led me to so many, opportunities, both doing Oscar campaigns, working with, great people like John Lasseter, and it also like on a handful of these, I'm working on turning them from anime series to live action and, working with great creative people, taking me back to my original, dream to begin with. But I think this time my attitude is a lot different. When things come up and, whether it's with my partner or with, even like we lost a showrunner and then somebody better came along that could really help it. And, dealing with the obstacles of now, like how you put a show together and all the different pieces and people, it's much more meaningful. But if I didn't change my attitude and be the happy warrior, I might have quit, because there's no, you can't avoid problems and you can't avoid obstacles. I mean, there are some people, yes, that, they come into the business, whether they're born into it or, they just have a lot of luck and everything. But most people, it's not inherent. Like I didn't have I had family that were like, my father's uncle two of them were very famous world-class musicians and they were the highest representation. And, I knew people connected with them and obviously had a great relationship with one of my uncles and, or Lionel Hampton, from when I was young. But I didn't come out and, my uncle wasn't the head of MGM. So when you're in that situation, you have to, it's like if you want to do this and you really want to realize your dreams, I mean, you have to, you learn what's really important to you. And I think the biggest life lesson that I've learned is that, I have the power, to create anything I want. And,
right.
So, I mean, and if you can be the happy warrior, it's easier to come to that conclusion than if you're angry or you're like, how come this keeps happening to me? And believe me, I did it the other way too. It wasn't like I didn't just come out here and say, oh, I remember when I was very young, even sitting in Buddhist lectures where they'd say like, obstacles are great benefits. And I would go to my senior leaders, why is that obstacle a great benefit to me? And then, you change over time because you start, like I would observe people that I knew over the course of the years, and the people that sort of had that philosophy, whether they were Buddhist or not, their careers always led them to where they wanted to go. They weren't getting in their own way. So I think that if you can be the happy warrior and, learn to appreciate everything in the way it comes, you will get further than if, because just because you don't think it's right or because you're resistant doesn't make you closer to getting the breakthrough.
Yeah, because you can't be successful and be unhappy. But it's interesting. In your point of view, I'm really curious and because what you've seen during your path in the entertainment industry, where successful people that are not nice. Therefore, they're not happy, and their attitude's not that great, but they reach levels of success that many people don't. Like, what is the difference? What do you feel is the difference between a person that is a happy warrior that achieves? Aside from attitude, right? What is that major difference between a person that achieves the success that they want as a happy warrior and the person that is unhappy and it also achieves a certain level of a success? What are the prime differences between that, and how do you differentiate between that so that we don't fall into the trap of being the latter, if that makes sense?
Well, I think for me, I can't, there's probably a lot of people that I might think are unhappy, and appear like that, and they might feel that they are happy warriors. So I think, I'm just can only speak for myself, but I would say that I'm always, the fact that I'm ever seeking, that I'm always looking for new horizons, that I'm enjoying every minute of this, and and that I feel that it's that I'm always on a new quest, and it's not so much about this deal is not going, I need to make all the money here so I can go buy a house in Bel Air or something. It's more, to me, it's more like a quest-oriented type of life where I'm experiencing, I'm enjoying it. I really, like the people I'm working with. I feel appreciative of the days of my creativity. And, I think that, but I don't have the same, I live very comfortably, but I, probably more minimalist than, some of the other people that, have, huge, mortgages or huge car payments or have to put their kids through school. Gratefully, I helped raise a goddaughter, but her parents paid for college, you know what I mean? So I didn't, my stresses are different. So I feel for me, my quest is more of proving to myself that I can do this, loving the experience of it, feeling like it's great that I'm going to be able to really give myself more financial security. But I'm pretty, I look at everything. It's also, because, I'm older now. I was probably more like the other people when I was 35, 40, but once after I got over 50, my life kind of just changed. It's like all this fortune just started rolling in. And, I just I feel that for me, it's like I'm looking just to climb the highest summit for myself, but it's more of a personal experience. It's not something where every aspect of my life is contingent on it.
Right. Priorities are a lot different, right?
Right.
Yeah. You talk about the quest, and there's definitely different levels of want. Some people want, fame and glory. Some people want, a Lamborghini in the hills, whatever it is. Some people just want to live a very basic life, but still do the best work. It's like bringing up Steve Jobs, for instance, right? I feel like Steve Jobs is a prime example. Yes, he was probably considered, extremely shrewd and mercurial, right? But he not only churned out good work, but he also wasn't the type of person that was materialistic who wanted a large house. I read in his bio years ago that because he lived in Palo Alto, he bought a 4-bedroom house. It was a decent sized house because he had a growing family. But when Bill Gates went to go visit him, he'd asked Steve Jobs, why would he live in a place with no security system, that wasn't big, a large compound. And Steve Jobs essentially just told him, I don't need it. That's not the type of life I want to live. And it just kind of goes to show you that regardless if you're worth billions, it's really just it really just comes down to the levels of want, right?
Right. But if that's what makes, I mean, to me, it's, like those kind of things would never make me, like, I'm more like the Steve Jobs. I could be happy. Because I don't, but there are people that if it does make them happier, so be it. I feel that, but I just think you have to have a natural, you have to really it's more to me about personal growth and actual proof. And it's not as much about, how many millions I'm going to make this year because, I probably won't even, and in the things that I'm working on, if it gives me, extra, right, security and happiness, but I could be happy. It doesn't matter to me, like what I drive, where I live. It's just as long as the people, as long as, I feel like my life is of a high quality, that's what makes me happy. So.
I love that. It's really about personal growth, right? In so many ways, that's so deep and highly essential, especially if you want to maintain the happy warrior mindset, right? We also mentioned that you're the board of the LA Femme International Film Festival. I want to talk about that a little bit too, because kind of describe what being on the board of that is and what the LA Femme International Film Festival is.
Well, let me first I'll tell you about the festival is 17 years old. It was started by Leslie LePage, and her idea was to, and a bunch of other ladies like the late Lupe Ontiveros, Kiki Melendez. They were looking for a way to showcase women's films to really help women filmmakers, and so every year my work with them has been more to add value to the festival. Like I brought in a lot of the sponsors. Like this year I just brought in Gunpowder and Sky, and they're going to look at all the fierce genre women's movies, their short films, because at Gunpowder they have platforms where they release shorts, Dust and Alter, and they also in some cases even commission feature films off of these shorts. But I also sponsor a panel at the Holly Shorts, and they have always been on my panel for the last couple of years. So I suppose we're co-sponsors of this career launch panel that's very relevant to the work that we both do. So they're coming in to La Femme, and they're going to highlight a whole a film block of the genre shorts, and they're going to look at all of them for possible acquisition. So if you're, so I think that, the great thing about La Femme is, also Sony Diversity and Inclusion, and they look at the screenplays and the shorts. And, there have been people that have participated in the festival where we've helped them get distribution, where they've gotten meetings at the different studios, and they're, they're all working on their way. It's very exciting because it's not like I have a client right now, and she has a short that she worked on with a guy from Northwestern. They went together, and they were selected for the Tribeca, film market. And I've also, gotten them into meetings like at Sony TV and other places that are interested in developing it as a series. So. So you kind of can see from the festival circuit, there are ways that, you can help people segue to their careers. And that's what I really enjoyed about it. So aside from bringing in sponsorships, I am the head of the panel division. So it's not like I make all the phone calls and program them all, but I'm, in that decision process. And I do, recruit people to be on them and bring in people that can sponsor them and make it a very educational and beneficial environment. And then, and then I help a lot getting the famous women that they've honored as well.
Wow, that's great. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen, your posts on the film festival, and I was just really curious about that, and I love the fact that it's been around for 17 years, and it highlights women filmmakers. During the last since have you been on the board since the past 17 years or
past 16?
Past 16 years,
right?
Okay, past 16 years. So you've definitely seen the growth of the film festival. Are a lot of these films? I'm just assuming they're independent, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So okay. So during the process, watching the growth of these filmmakers, you must have connected with many up and coming female filmmakers. Obviously we know that the first legit filmmaker, I guess, was back in the 20s, right? I forget what her name was. Man, I'm so horrible with names sometimes, but we know that she was literally the one that created a lot of these shorts, but she never got credit for it. And do you know this person?
No.
Are you familiar with that? So I'm going to Google it really quickly, but essentially, she was she was literally the first one who experimented with camera movement, stories. She put stories together, and she did a lot to kind of like to describe what the filmmaking world is like. Oh, Alice Guy Blanche. Wait, Alice Guy Blash. I can't pronounce the last name. Her essentially Alice Guy, Blache. Blache, I think it is. Right. She's the world cinema's first woman director, and her legacy remains defined by that title because she was multi-dimensional figure, writing, producing, and supervising films, instructing players and other directors, and also making costumes. Right. So it's crazy to see. The reason why I want to connect these two, because it's crazy to see that in the beginning, you had this female director figuring out all this stuff, right? And then bam, she gets kicked out of the whole system. Fast forward to current day, 2021. These things are starting to like really, surface up and start to create this rapid momentum, if you will. So within the last 16 years that you've been doing this festival, what kinds of interesting filmmakers have you noticed and that could stand out and that would make a huge difference in this world today? Like, who are those filmmakers? And feel free to put names if you want to highlight their names. But like, who are these filmmakers that are coming out that are creating certain movements in that world, so that we can see more of this?
Well, I mean, I give you. I mean, I don't want to take anything away because I've had so many different clients, but I would say, the people that I tend to, talk with the most are, Andrea Janikis, and she's now doing a TV series for CBS, but she started with a short called Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves that starred Amanda Seyfried, and she's a very strong voice, especially in the LGBTQ community. Michelle Sam, somebody who I've mentored on and off since I've met her, but she was an example of. She had a lot of scripts, that very prolific writer and very talented, but she ended up, there was a film challenge that was like for a few $100s to create a short. She ended up teaming with this transgender woman that's actually a Buddhist, Alexis. I'll get you her name, but that movie ended up really opening up doors for her career like anything. And she's got a very strong voice. Now she's writing a series on refugees in Greece for Nicole Kidman, and pitching a comedy series with Rashida Jones. And she wrote a series of her own experiences like as a struggling actress / producer of a series called Black Sheep that actually Drake is is executive producing. So,
Wow.
she has like, a lot. In fact, let me look up that lady's name. But so, those are people. I think when it transpires into something that's so, that's so undeniable, where you like, where you just one thing kind of leads to another. I think that those are like, the things that are the most prolific. I've had some terrific, what do you, no, wait a second, let me just, okay.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, I definitely agree that strong voices and being prolific is important, especially.
It was Angelica Ross. Sorry, that's the name of. It's a transgender woman that starred in her film, and it was a really strong. It was just a very strong conceptual piece that was very like, well directed, well acted. Very, it really opened up a lot of doors. So yes, I think that sometimes you're getting like fresh voices, and then you can kind of tell if some people are like the real deal, or some people. It just depends on how far and long they want to go.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So in your opinion, who are the female directors or writers, filmmakers? Period. Who are the female filmmakers that are up and coming right now that you see that are going to shift, that have a strong voice and prolific? Who are the ones that you see that will be shifting, the next generation of cinema?
Well, I feel that Michelle is definitely going to be the next Shonda Rhimes, and that AJ, she's like another, person, in that realm. I just really can't speak to,
There's a lot.
There's a lot of them. And it's hard for me to say, like, like Sofia Coppola, I think is super talented. There's like so many different, women, film directors and filmmakers that, it's hard to say. That, who is going to be, who's got that, that strong voice, like Ava DuVernay, someone really, so.
Right. I think you're right because as times change, we're not really sure on how people are going to take certain content, right? And so we never know what's going to happen. And I think that's a really, really good point to kind of like put out there that being kind of echoing back the idea of the happy warrior. It's really important to have that mentality and the attitude and mindset in order to move forward, because we have no idea what's going to be hitting, in the horizons. Deb, if there is one piece of thought that you would like to leave the listeners, that one person, right, that you would like to touch their heart, what would that be?
Well, I would say that even if it's the hardest thing you do, to look at everything, every kind of inner transformational experience as a stepping stone to that outer reward that you're looking for. And don't fight it so much. And, and don't make everything like, I feel like when I was younger that, I made too much of things that really weren't important, like that if something, the world is a bigger place, and that you shouldn't get caught up with I would have friends that would just, sell big scripts, direct big movies and stuff. And, a lot of times I, was upset that, I have this poor me kind of attitude. And then when I shifted that, and I was able to really just be so happy with, the fact that I had so much opportunity, then I did have so much opportunity. It just didn't come in the way that, it just came on a different perspective. And actually, I'm probably happier now than I've ever been. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I love that.
I mean, you can't help but be young, and you can't help but, have all those, like have those things that are disappointments or ups and downs. But I think if you can be the happy warrior, then you're shifting it, and you're looking at it as a challenge that you can overcome, rather than going down the rabbit hole of despair and failure. I mean, it's really up to you. I mean, and I think that life is life tests.
Yeah. I mean, I think just to also kind of, touch base on what you were saying, that all obstacles are opportunities to really expand and learn, right? I mean, and those are the things that are coming up in our lives that we, we need to be able to handle and manage, not just directly, but also emotionally as well, right?
Right.
Deb, is there any social media, any links that people can get in touch with you if they would like to chat with you? Maybe
I'm on Instagram at Deborah Gilels, or on Facebook I'm on too.
Awesome. Okay, so just those two links, Instagram and Facebook, right?
Right.
Okay, beautiful. Deborah, wow, this has been a great dialogue, and we really got deep into this conversation. And I love that you brought up the happy warrior too. So thank you again for your time.
Oh, believe me, it's my pleasure. It's always fun to catch up with you anyway. You're one of my favorite people.
Likewise. It's a reflection. All right. Well, so that's pretty much it. I'm sure I'm going to be talking to you real soon anyway. But thank you again, and I will talk to you soon. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Peace out.